Live on WFLA now. Feel good and live your best life with Bloom Health Club. Here's Gail Guayardo.
Well, as most people know, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And while there is a lot of talk about fighting cancer, today we're flipping the script and we are talking about breast health awareness. Joining me now is the CEO of Women, Wisdom, and Wellness, nurse practitioner Lori D. Finlay. Lori, welcome to Bloom Health Club. It is a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure on my end. Such an honor. Thank you.
And I also want to introduce you to our producer, Sarah Smith. She's going to be behind the scenes, but she'll be jumping in with questions throughout the day. And so we're excited to talk to you because you're giving us a different lens to look through when it comes to breast cancer, because really we need to be thinking about breast health awareness. There's so much we can do.
Absolutely. There's so much we can do.
And you say that, and this is something that I looked up in the National Cancer Institute, that only 5 to 10% of cancers are actually linked to our DNA, to our family risk.
Right.
So that means there's so much control that we have.
Absolutely. That's what's so empowering and why I love doing DNA testing with clients. I didn't do my DNA test till I was 50 years old, but it changed everything for me. I use an analogy. I'm a musician, so I use the analogy of a piano. You know, we all know there are strings on the piano. You lift up the lid and there's strings, right? And those strings are connected to the notes. And we don't know if the piano is going to play Bach or Billy Joel, or if the piano is going to express itself with Beethoven or the Beatles, right? It takes an external influence of the pianist to determine the expression. And I like to use that analogy with DNA. We've got our wiring, right? Sometimes there could be a broken string on the piano, so you could press that note and nothing's going to happen. In DNA terms, that means like it's completely, the gene isn't there. I mean, it's not working at all. So genes cause, they cause the expression, right? And they will release or cause, I can't even think of the word right now, but they will cause the expression, right? And then there's, if you press a note and it's sharp or it's flat, in DNA terms, that could mean that it's functioning at 30% capacity or 60%, or it's over functioning. But we can do things to cause even a bad gene to work better. So what are we doing every day that's causing our genes to express? Dr. Ben Lynch uses the words in his book called Dirty Genes. What's causing us to dirty our healthy genes? Or there are things that we can do to make a dirty or bad gene work even better.
I love it. So right now, mammograms are considered to be the first line of defense when it comes to detecting breast cancer. But you say there's starting to be a shift and more money is being invested into other ways to determine our risk for breast cancer. You mentioned the DNA testing. You're talking about something called a Dutch test, correct?
Correct.
Now, I've had so many people that have joined us on Bloom, our globally syndicated health and wellness show that is headquartered here in Tampa, Florida. But I don't believe that this Dutch test is known about on a wide enough level.
It's not.
I have no idea what it is. I've never heard of it.
Of a Dutch test,
No.
yeah. And apparently this is a window into health that you have to go to. Sally, you're not going to hear about this at your regular checkup when you go in. This is something more that functional medicine doctors are talking about, and people like yourself that really have your finger on the pulse of what's going on when it comes to holistic wellness.
Right. Well, it stands for dry urine testing of comprehensive hormones. So it doesn't just look at estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. It also looks at all of the metabolites, and it looks at DHEA, and it looks at your cortisol, and it looks at neurotransmitters, and it looks at inflammatory markers. It looks at the metabolites of your B vitamins and your glutathione, and all of these things that might be impacting breast health and overall hormone-related disease, right? It's
so this
phenomenal.
is a test that you actually monitor your urine for a 24-hour period of time. I don't believe it was a Dutch test, but I did a similar test that just got released into the marketplace. And Sarah can tell you, she's in the Bloom office. I was literally running to the bathroom, collecting my urine every 4 hours and putting them into little vials into the refrigerator. I was safe, everybody. Don't worry there. I was not contaminated.
I was wondering what it was at first, but after you explained it, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
No.
And so, but the Dutch test also involves saliva testing as well, correct?
Right. Well, and the great thing is you don't have to collect it, right? So there's 5 different little tubes with a cotton swab to collect your saliva, and then 4 different urine samples throughout the day, and it's all timed appropriately, and they're small enough, of course, to put in your pocket or in your purse, right? And so you time those throughout the day, and then the next morning you send it off in the mail. So it's really simple. You can either, first you have to put the little cotton swab in your mouth, right, and collect your saliva like the minute, like within nanoseconds of waking up. So you can get what's called the cortisol awakening response. That gives you an indication of your overall reserve, your adrenal reserve. How is your body doing? How is stress impacting your body, right? And then, again, you get those samples throughout the day of your urine to look at, urine and saliva, to look at the hormone levels. But they're measuring metabolites. And there's an extraordinary amount of research out there showing how these are so spot on and even perhaps more effective than just a serum or a blood level.
Very interesting. Because they're getting that just one time. A serum or a blood is right then and there. It's a one snap shot. You're talking about
all day.
All day.
They also have a test for women that need it, that are having infertility issues. They have a test called the Dutch mapping test, and they take samples for 14 days to look at your ovulation and see, are you ovulating prematurely? Are you ovulating late? I had a client in her early 30s that was really having struggles with her moods, and we could see on that test that she was peaking really high and then dropping really fast, and which was causing her symptoms. And a few little tweaks, nutritionally can make those changes.
So you take the Dutch test, and while we're talking about breast cancer, because it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, this is really giving medical professionals a deep dive into what's going on inside your body. At what age would you recommend the first Dutch test? Because again, we should also point out that the Dutch test is not covered by insurance. So this is going to be an out-of-pocket expenditure. But I think as women, we find the money for our Botox, we find the money for our fillers. So we should find the money to try to get a handle on our own health.
Right, exactly. Well, Dr. Tara Scott, who's one of my sheroes, is one of the renowned faculty for the functional medicine, community. And she's an OBGYN. She's been practicing for decades. And she has said that the Dutch test should be, quote, standard of care at age 25, 35, 45, 55. So right now, the mammogram is the standard of care. She was like, this needs to be standard of care because we can see so early on. And I see this on lab tests with clients in their early 30s, late 20s, where their hormone metabolism is in really rough shape. Like they need to change their diet or they need to really slow down on the alcohol because this is sending them beeline for a breast disease trajectory.
Yeah. So a lot of what we're doing as women is that we're eating the wrong foods. We're overweight. We're not exercising properly. Like you say, we're drinking too much. I mean, that became a huge issue of mine during the pandemic.
Right.
I was sitting around making charcuterie boards with my husband and popping open bottles of wine. There was nothing else to do. And when it was time to get back to reality, I had to dial that back.
Right.
Quite a bit. And I think a lot of women did, but we really need, so what, Lori, what do we need to be focusing on?
We need to be focusing on, I focus on 4 things. We need to go green. We need to go green with our food, like organic, green, whole food, not packaged food. If there's a bunch of ingredients that you can't pronounce them, that's a good indicator that this is made in a plant. It's not plant-based, right? So like a healthy, whole, green environment, food. And that's not full of toxins from the environment. Then we need to make sure that we're having good, healthy protein, that we can make amino acids from our proteins, from our neurotransmitters and everything else. But healthy, wild-caught or grass-fed beef and chicken, is optimal. Making sure that we get rid of our toxic cosmetics, our personal care products. So go green with personal care, go green with our cleaning products. And then I help women understand how critically important progesterone is. there's been some studies, and these were done in 1981, but these are not published. Women have still not been educated. The fact that progesterone deficiency is a huge, huge risk for breast cancer. And we see that not just in perimenopausal women whose progesterone limits plummet, but we see this, what they call estrogen dominance, which means that it's a ratio. There's too much estrogen compared to the progesterone. And so it's estrogen dominant state. But we see this in young teenagers with their horrible acne and their horrible mood swings and the weight gain and PMS because of the toxins. You know, if you go to the mall and you get all of these body sprays and all this stuff, they're just loaded with these xenoestrogens or foreign estrogens. And so we need to clean that up and get rid of those and then find natural sources of healthy progesterones, right? With green herbs and vegetables. And you can use some essential oils like basil and thyme, you know, can support progesterone. Even a progesterone cream if necessary, you know, using that wisely. But the most important thing, of course, is to get rid of the toxic estrogen burden first and then support your progesterone. And then I really want women to know how important detoxing or cleansing is. Because again, we've got to get those things out. So we can do things like saunas, infrared saunas. We can stimulate our lymph system by jumping on a little mini trampoline. I've got one I keep next to my desk, and every 15 minutes or so, I'll get up and bounce for a minute and stimulate my brain and stimulate my lymph, or use a dry lymph brush. Or there's something else, and your listeners can look it up online, fluffing. With an F, fluffing. What is that?
Yeah, what is
that? You
that?
literally bend over at the waist, just kind of lean over a little bit and literally shake your breasts a bit.
Okay.
Right, to stimulate the movement in your breasts. You know, we wear these bras that just strap us in when actually the movement is really good for our lymph, to stimulate our lymph and to get toxins out of the breast tissue. So things like that can help. Improving your glutathione levels, improving your glutathione support. And by the way, when I said alcohol, limit alcohol, to cleanse alcohol or metabolize alcohol requires glutathione. And glutathione is the master detoxifier in our body. So if we're drinking all kinds of alcohol, then you're using up your glutathione storage on the alcohol instead of detoxing the toxic estrogens that could lead you down the road to breast disease or breast cancer.
So how do you improve your glutathione levels? I've gone on a series of shots before. I've swished stuff around in my mouth. I mean, are there other ways to get glutathione?
Yes. I mean, certainly cruciferous vegetables are really important. If people had homemade, homegrown broccoli sprouts every day, or at least buy them at Sprouts or buy them at Whole Foods or wherever, get some broccoli sprouts and have broccoli sprouts every day. And, again, broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts. But if we cook them too long and you can walk in the kitchen and go, oh, I smell Brussels sprouts, then you've cooked them too long. You've killed what's called the indole-3 carbanols, which help detox all the toxins, right? So making sure that you have more raw would be helpful, or barely al dente. So we think your diet's really important. And glutathione drops by 10% every decade after the age of 20.
Oh my gosh.
So I support my glutathione, right? And that's if you lived in a perfect bubble with no alcohol, no sleep deprivation, a perfect diet, no environmental toxins, not too much exercise, good exercise, but not too much. So I support my glutathione with a product called Cellgevity. It's on my website. It's the only product in the world that is endogenous glutathione support, which means you get the ingredients to up level by 300% your glutathione production in your body. So if you're going to have your wine, right, then make sure you have some glutathione support to offset it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. You talk about the fact that you yourself, you practice healthy, you practice what you preach, basically. You eat very healthy, you exercise, your movement. This is something, but you also supplement. What supplementation do you recommend for women, or is this something that you should do after like a Dutch test and a deep dive, because we're not all created equally? That's
a great point, right? Because again, we all have genetic markers that we may need to compensate for. And that's why I love doing DNA tests. And I can see genetic expression on the Dutch test. Like it literally has specific markers that map onto, or I see the exact same name and title on the Dutch test. I mean, on a DNA test. So it's really exciting to see that. But the things that I recommend for women, again, 2 or 3 things. Number one is supporting glutathione, a glutathione supplement. And again, instead of one made in the laboratory, I prefer one that my body is making my glutathione. God gave us that as a longevity molecule. We've just been destroying it by the amount of, toxic stress we're under and the toxins in our environment and lots of alcohol. So we're decreasing the storage even faster. The second thing I recommend is a really good vitamin D. Most people don't realize that their vitamin D levels are really low, and they should be between 50 to 70 or 80 nanograms. And people are hanging out in the teens, and that's a really high risk for cancer. It's very, very important for our bone health as well, but vitamin D is also very important for our immune system. And I like to also make sure women have adequate amounts of vitamin C, which supports their glutathione pathways, the detoxification process, as well as B vitamins. B vitamins are really important for hormones. And then there's essential fatty acids. We need essential fatty acids. And in our current world, where there's so many statin drugs and people are lowering their cholesterol with all these statin drugs, our hormones start with cholesterol, and then they convert to cholesterol converts to pregnenolone, which then converts to progesterone. And if people's cholesterol is too low, they don't have enough to make their hormones. And then we wonder, particularly as women, as we age, why we have a higher risk of Alzheimer's disease. Like, we don't have enough hormones to protect our hearts and our brains and our bones and our breasts. So hormone balance is really, really important.
So it sounds almost like a slippery slope that we get on as women when it comes to, when you start to peel back the onion layers of all the things that we are doing, we're setting ourselves up for disaster versus this new scope that you've become so passionate about, and that is to look at health from a very young age. So you were an RN, you were more into critical care than anything else. What made you decide to pivot in life and to go in this direction?
That's
away from this prescription drugs, away from all the things that are Band-Aids in our life?
Yeah, I had a master's degree as a clinical nurse specialist in critical care. And then I got another graduate degree as a nurse practitioner. So there was an adult nurse practitioner working in cardiology and loving it, and traveling all over the country and speaking and being wined and dined by the pharmaceutical industry. I started a big risk reduction clinic because I could see that patients were being wheeled in the cath lab every 6 months. It's like, we're not getting to the root cause here. Let's start focusing on their risk factors, their diet and their lifestyle and their smoking and their, inactivity and all of this, right? So that was like my first bridge into the wellness world. And then my dad dropped dead suddenly from a massive heart attack. And it was life-changing, right? It was like God and I had a conversation. I said, I can't do this anymore. I need to spend the rest of my life in wellness. And then he gave me a new curriculum, a new master's degree or graduate degree. They often say, yeah, you need to get a master's in keeping yourself healthy, right? And I was very sick for a long time. I had toxic heavy metals and black mold toxicity and Epstein-Barr, all because of my DNA. And I didn't know at the time. And so I had to go on quite a healing journey. And I had PTSD and all this stuff mixed in there, and I had to heal my body. And it's, I've got a little video on my website. But bottom line is I had to go on quite a healing curriculum to learn about functional medicine instead of critical care medicine. Let's get to the root cause. And sometimes one of the root cause is childhood adverse events and trauma. My mother died when I was 2 years old and 1 week. I mean, like all those things in our lives, emotional trauma and stress, all of those things have a significant impact on our health and wellness. We need to focus on body, mind, spirit medicine. So that long journey created such an incredible passion. In my realm of work, they call it from pain to passion, right? Or from pain to purpose.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. I do too.
We've talked a lot about on Bloom about how trauma manifests itself into the physical body. So it's interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah. And one of my heroes, Dr. Bruce Lipton, was faculty at Stanford University and taught biology, cellular biology for decades. And then he was introduced to quantum physics, blew his mind, changed his career. He wrote the book called The Biology Belief that came out 20 years ago. And, I guess it was 10 years ago or so. And I read it and was just hooked on epigenetics, like on top of our genes. What can we do? I got to hear him speak in August of 2019 up in Atlanta, and in a big church. It was standing room only. It was amazing. The lecture was completely finished. It was off the stage. The cameras were done. And he hops back up on the stage. And now it was a pin drop. And he was like, I have one more thing to say. And he said, cancer is caused by the lack of forgiveness.
Oh, wow.
And the whole crowd, who were believers already in epigenetics and being very careful about the words we speak and our thoughts, right? And the music we listen to and the things that we watch and the people we hang out with and the impact on a cellular level and a DNA level, right? That was very profound, and I'll never forget that, right?
That's beautiful. And, another thing that we talk about on Bloom, which whenever you talk about faith or spirituality or belief systems in general, people can get uncomfortable, but I think our messaging is that we're not trying to tell you what to believe in. We're not taking a side of which faith is better than that. But what we are trying to do is open up the conversation that connecting at a higher level, whatever that might be, can be a game changer. And we have experts come on all the time, mental health experts, that talk about the damage that can be done to our minds and our bodies on a physical level of holding on to anger,
Yes.
holding on to resentment. These are things that, manifest themselves. I mean, like the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I could go
Right.
one
Oh my
after the
gosh.
next, after the next. We've talked about this. And so I think that that's really cool, that coming from a medical background, that you are a believer in the role that our minds and trauma plays in our healing.
Absolutely. Right. I remember when I had my own breast disease, 2 lumps. They were benign, thank goodness. But I'll never forget that moment when I found out that they were there, and then got the MRI. And yes, they're definitely there. I did a special test to make sure they were benign. So I knew I definitely had time, but I knew that I had work to do. So I really dug in and did work on my breast health. Again, improving my lymph flow, and did some energy medicine, and did emotional and spiritual work, up-leveled all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the exercises, though, was actually a Qigong exercise, right, called dry crying, where you arch your back backwards and you pretend like you're sobbing. So you're, like your body. We as women, we trap emotions. We don't express the grief, and we don't release the grief. And all of that is stored in our heart around our breast center. Our heart chakra, our breasts are surrounded in our heart chakra. So there are even things like that can make a difference, right? Of learning to release the stress, release the grief, release the burdens that we are carrying, so that we know that we're not trapping them in our body. For heaven's sakes, getting some chakra healing work done, right? Getting a massage, getting a lymph massage, doing those kind of things can be very supportive to our hormones. And I honestly think one of the most important exercises we can do is a mini rebounder.
What's a mini rebounder?
Just a little teeny trampoline.
Oh, yeah.
Little
You
teeny
mentioned that
trampoline.
earlier. Yeah, I didn't know it was called a
I need to
mini.
get myself a trampoline.
Me too. We need to get one in the office. We can
Yes,
take turns
yes, we
jumping
do.
up and down, and this is really interesting. I mean, these are all things to think about. And you and I talked about this, Lori. It's like, I think as women, many times we don't take time for this self-care, and we don't feel like we even deserve it. I know, as a mother of 4 daughters and juggling a demanding career, trying to stay devoted to an amazing husband, all of these things, I always found myself on the back burner. And truth be told, it wasn't till I did this show. And this show came about in a very serendipitous way. I was a morning news anchor. I lost both my parents to cancer, my dad and my mom, 1 year apart from one another. Then I lost my voice and my power to do, the voice to do the job that I love so much. And then the pandemic hit. And I thought, wow, talk about going out with a fizzle. And then all of a sudden this show, it just landed. It's like you and I were talking, I feel like God gave me the gift of this show. And it was through the show and meeting people like yourself that I finally decided, you know what, I need to take a little bit of time.
Right.
I'm run down. My hair is falling out. I don't feel good. I'm tired. I too had Epstein-Barr. Like, I was just crumbling. My thyroid was spiraling and circling the drain. So as women, if we talk about anything to end this podcast and the streaming platform, it's about taking the time, because if you don't, you're not going to be there to love and take care of the people that you strive to please day in and day out.
Absolutely. I had goosebumps all over me as you shared your story, right? And as women, we think that self-care is selfish, when in reality, our loved ones need us to prioritize our self-care.
They really do.
We cannot give from an empty cup. We cannot be kind and generous and patient. We can't be with them if we're constantly doing for everyone else. We need to be focused on being grounded. I know for myself in the last 3 or 4 years, I did an amazing certification, and I had been really good at self-care. And then I did a new certification called Creation Coach. And it helped me to create a morning and an evening ritual that is so sustaining and empowering. And in fact, when I went through my divorce, I up-leveled even that exquisite care so that I would be healthy on the other end of the emotional trauma. But the whole point is to help women understand they don't have to be perfect at their self-care. They can start with little teeny baby steps. I call them floors. Like, what's your 1-minute version? To be consistent instead of perfect. What's your 1-minute version of your goal? If you want to do yoga every day, what if you did 3 cat-cows? Or if you want to stimulate your lymph flow, well, what if you did 1 minute on the trampoline? Or what if you did the fluffing? Or what if you did 1 minute of dry brushing? Or what if you had one good green drink with no sugar, right? If you don't have time to make your sprouts this morning or eat your sprouts. There's little things that we can do.
Baby steps, baby steps. Well, in closing on Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we want to thank you, Lori, for coming on the show and just making this a bigger conversation. What we're trying to help women do is not to even find themselves in the fight against this deadly disease, but to do things proactively, starting at a young age now, to take control of your health. Again, I know you have a website. You even do like free quizzes and things that women can take. Because earlier, I feel a little bad earlier. I'm saying we find money for Botox, we find money for filler and things like that. There might be women out there saying, no, Gail, I don't find the money for even that. I don't have the money to, go get this Dutch test that's needs to be more widely talked about. But you have quizzes and ways for people to engage, correct?
Yeah. Ways for people to engage at a very, very low cost, because I know some women can't afford a private consult with me or the Dutch test, or they may not even be able to afford group coaching. But I also have free 20-minute calls if we want to go over the results of your test. Right? That's helpful. The last thing I wanted to say is, I want women to know they have choice. And even if they got a diagnosis of breast cancer, that they have time to make a wise choice. They do not have to be rushed into anything. They can examine all of their choices. And there are phenomenal people educating out there. And they can certainly, connect with me, and I can refer people to other Dutch providers across the nation. There's really lots of more choice that women have.
I love it. All right, everybody. Sarah, thank you for joining in and for punching the show behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
You are an amazing producer. I'm so grateful for you. Make sure you share with your friends about Bloom Health Club and subscribe. And we are on all the platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. You can find us on our Facebook pages, on bloomtampabay.com. We're everywhere. And we're just trying to spread the good word about bringing you good health so you can live your best life. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.